I just zoom in really close so you can't tell whether I'm wearing one or not. I'm not. Hi, Nicole.
Good morning.
Morning.
All righty. Well, we are at the top of the hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us this morning. NEDA is excited for the opportunity to host this webinar. A couple notes before we get started. If you haven't noticed, I will be muting everyone as you're entering the webinar. So if you have any questions while the presentations are going on, feel free to put those in the chat feature and we'll get those answered at the end here. Or you can raise your virtual hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. I've got a few more people I'm going to let in here before I turn it over to Cobus. Lots of people coming in here. Okay. Okay, I would like to introduce our two speakers this morning, Cobus Block, Director of International Business Recruitment at the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, and Susan Rouch, Export Development Manager at Nebraska Department of Economic Development. Thank you both for your time this morning. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Cobus.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks to NEDA for the invite. We always appreciate the opportunity to give our partners an update on kind of what we're doing and sort of our thought process here. As Megan mentioned, my name is Cobus Block. I have the pleasure of leading both the international and business recruitment teams. That's a bit of a new situation. In the past, those teams have been separated. We made the decision to combine them last year in August. And I'll go into a little bit of details on why. Before I get started, just want to make sure everyone can see my screen. Can I get a thumbs up if people can? Great. So I'll just dive right in. When I talk about the international team, we basically have, I would say, three main goals. And that is, number one, to support exporters. We do that through a variety of resources that I'll go into a little bit later. And then Susan, who's our resident export guru, will go into one specific program that I think it might have a lot of great opportunities for some of the businesses in your local community. Then second, our goal is to attract foreign direct investment. This overlaps quite a bit with what the business recruitment team does, and that's the reason why we made the decision to kind of combine those two teams. A lot of the time, the business recruitment team that you all are probably more familiar with is working with multinationals anyway. And so there becomes a gray line between what is domestic business recruitment and what is international business recruitment. And we wanted to have the opportunity to leverage the resources of the recruitment team in order to attract larger international firms to come to the state. So that's our second goal on the international team. And then finally, we do general state promotion. So in this, we work with some of our partners, as an example, the University of Nebraska system, and then local organizations to promote opportunities here in the state, promote the state generally, get our name out. We do that primarily through trips, whether that's staff-led or on a larger scale, elected governor or elected lieutenant governor trade missions. And then also through maintaining trade offices overseas. So before we get into it, here is a look at what our team looks like on the international side. So I've left off the business recruiters. On the international side, you'll recognize myself and Susan. Taylor Bolam is a business associate here who has been with us for about 3 years now, has been a great addition to our team. And then down here we have some of our contractors. We have maintained an office in Japan since 2006. Hisami Magawa leads that. That's based in Tokyo. And then we last year started a trade office in Germany. That's led by Tio Freya. And then we used to have an office in China. We've since closed that, but we still have somebody who represents Nebraska to China, works with Chinese companies, and then also works with Nebraska companies trying to do business there. And that's Jennifer John. First of all, kind of give you an idea of what Nebraska's sort of situation on the export side looks like. You can find this information. This is a interactive resource that's available on our website. The link is down on the lower right-hand side there, and I think we'll send out this to everyone afterwards, and so you can follow along there. But in general, as you would expect, Nebraska is a very strong ag exporting state. Our largest exporters, by and large, are ag commodities, but we do have a number of manufactured goods outside of that as well that we are exporting. Our major partners are in North America, as you would expect. Outside of North America, our largest markets tend to be in East Asia, although that all changes depending on what exactly we're talking about exporting. So, you know, the East Asian export markets are primarily ag markets. If we're talking about manufactured goods, then things become a little bit more interesting. This data is all something that we put together based on data from the USDA Food and Agricultural Service, and then also from the International Trade Administration. So it's an amalgamation of data. It's a little bit different. As far as resources that are available, one thing that we put together more recently is this Nebraska Exporters Index. What we try to do is have a list of companies that are either already exporting or we feel like are at a stage where they could export, and then collect data on sales, contact, website information, etc. And so this is a searchable database that's available on our website that we can either direct companies to that might be interested in sourcing a product from Nebraska, or that we can use ourselves when we're trying to find a company that might fit a hole that we have identified. So take a look at this. If you don't find a company in your community that you think would fit this, we'd be happy to add them. And so you can certainly reach out and let us know, and we'll get them added. Another resource that we have put together recently is actually Taylor Bolam has been in charge of, is this Nebraska Exporters Brief. This is a bi-weekly update. It's a really great in terms of information. It has a lot of stuff on just general opportunities or general international news, but then also highlights specific events or specific upcoming opportunities that we think Nebraska companies should be aware of. Those include events and things that are being done inside the state, but then also things that are being done, overseas that might be attractive to certain companies. Additionally, here are a few other resources. There is a Steps to Exporting page on the Nebraska Department of Economic Development website. You can use to kind of walk through a checklist to see if your company is ready for export or what sort of steps need to be taken in order to get to export. It's very basic, and so probably is worthwhile talking to somebody like Susan, for instance, or people at NBDC in order to determine what steps would be good to get to the next step, but it helps to kind of outline where your company might fall. And then this international events calendar is also a great resource for companies that are looking for opportunities to get into the export market. We try to list a variety of different trade shows or events that are going on around the world that we think Nebraska companies might be interested in, and also try and list down on those which ones that we're planning to attend or which ones we're planning to have some sort of presence at. We can coordinate with a company if they're interested. And then finally, there is a list of international resources that is available in Nebraska here. Those include, of course, government resources, federal resources, but then also third parties that can be helpful to companies to get their products overseas, whether that's compliance testing, international bankers, attorneys, etc. So that's a high-level view of the export side of things. I'll let Susan go into more depth after this. I'm going to turn now to the investment side of things. We think that there's probably about 31,000 jobs that are directly tied to investments here in Nebraska. That's data that's based on the Foreign Commercial Service. Those are, as an example of industries where investment comes into the state, bioscience and renewable, advanced manufacturing, food processing, fintech, but of course, a lot more and a lot varied industries. To give you an idea of what that looks like, this is a very simplified map of where we see a lot of the investment across the state. As you can see, as you would expect, the larger cities have a large amount of investment, but it's certainly not only in Lincoln and Omaha. We have international investments all across the state, and they bring a lot to the communities that they're in. Down on the lower right-hand side, I've listed a few kind of well-known names that you'll see and that have significant presences here in the state. Again, you can see they're in advanced manufacturing, biosciences, and then food processing. So kind of what you'd expect to see. That FDI is coming from all over the world. There's a lot of different countries that have specific focuses, but it's really varied where our investment comes from. So some of our bigger sources of investment, of course, Mexico, Japan, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Brazil, but there's more besides that. And then for us, we see kind of three major industries that have a lot of potential in foreign direct investment and that have already had a lot of success. And so those are the places where we are really trying to focus. That's biosciences, or what I would call industrial biotech, food processing and agricultural machinery, or ag tech. I'll go into a little bit more detail on those later to explain our thought process there, but those are the ones that we're kind of focused on. So when you're talking about investment, foreign direct investment into the state, that can have a couple different there's a number of different ways of looking at it. So number one, investment into the state can happen through either an international company investing in a local Nebraska company or acquiring a local Nebraska company. So give you a few examples of how that looks. Monolith Materials is a company that has a hydrogen plant outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. They recently received a very sizable investment from Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. So that company still has, is still based in Nebraska and still is a Nebraska-owned company, but it is it's received a significant infusion of cash from a foreign company, right? So on the flip side, Gavilon was the local Nebraska company that was acquired by a large Japanese trading house, Marubeni, several years ago. So Gavilon still maintains its headquarters in Nebraska, but it's part of a larger network through Marubeni that is based in Tokyo. And then CropX is recently purchased CropMetrics, which was a local Nebraska startup. And CropX is an Israeli company. And so when they came in, they purchased CropMetrics. They basically turned that company completely into CropX, but they've kept the jobs here and they are doing a lot more work with Rinke and have expanded their presence here in the state. So those are kind of the I would say almost the easiest ways to invest, do foreign direct investment. But the real kind of area where we focus is on greenfield investment. Greenfield investment tends to have the largest impact in terms of how it impacts the community with jobs and brings growth. And so that's where we tend to focus most of our activity. Here, just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, I've got three different examples of greenfield investment that have happened recently here in the state. On the top, this is the grand opening for Veramaris. Veramaris is a biotech company that's doing exciting things with omega-3 fatty acids distilled from a process that uses Nebraska corn. That's a Dutch and German joint venture that set up shop here, I think probably 4 years ago. Maybe three years, I can't remember now. Then on the bottom right-hand corner, this is Grapel. Grapel started with a sales office here in Omaha several years ago. Since grown, they now employ about 50 employees. They have a full line of manufacturing in Omaha, and we're hoping to see them grow further. So that's metal fabrication or perforation, and that's a great example of kind of that building it from scratch and a greenfield investment. And then finally, Kawasaki. This is an expansion of an original greenfield investment. Kawasaki employs, I think, right now about 2,500 people in Lincoln. This is their opening ceremony for their aviation department, or aeronautics rather, aerospace and aeronautics department that they opened a few years ago. So a lot of this will be familiar to all of you in terms of how we attract companies to come to the state of Nebraska. It's very similar to anything we would be doing with a domestic company. A lot of these companies are looking at the same sort of thing. So, besides trying to find the appropriate site and make sure that we address any of their concerns about, say, workforce or about access to, whether it's electricity or gas or any of that, we're also making sure that we have incentives that are helpful to the company and address their needs. As you're all aware, Imagine Nebraska is the most recent iteration of the tax credit program for the state of Nebraska. Outside of that, we have 3 kind of discretionary funds that we really rely on. That's site and building development, customized job training, both of which are in-house at the department, and then the DOT, the Department of Transportation's Economic Opportunity Program has been another fund that more recently we've relied increasingly on. Outside of those sort of resources, the biggest thing that we can get is testimonials from our already located companies. So a lot of the companies that have built a presence here in the state, foreign-owned companies that have built a presence here in the state, have had very positive experiences. And we're fortunate that they're often willing to let us use their voice to sell the state. And nothing, speaks better than having a company go to bat for you like that. And I use Kawasaki specifically because they've been a great partner for us to help not only with their own development, but to help bring in additional suppliers that are in their supply chain who also locate in Nebraska. So they've really gone to bat for us and helped to, go and actually meet directly with companies and talk to them about what we're doing and really encourage them to set up shop here, partly because it helps them, but also because they believe in the product that we have to offer here at the state. Now coming back to kind of, what we're focused on or what we kind of are looking at is in terms of what we think has the best opportunity. We've identified these 3 areas as kind of the place we want to kind of focus on the most. This is based primarily on studies that we've had done in the past, the Patel study, the SRI International, and then more recently, the study that was done by Blueprint Nebraska. And these are, kind of common sense areas where it makes sense given our strengths as a state in agriculture, that we think we have a really good shot at bringing in additional investment. So after kind of identifying those areas as being places we really want to focus on for attracting international investment, we worked with the Foreign Commercial Service to try and identify which countries are the sources of the primary sources of greenfield investment in those industries. So again, the mergers and acquisitions is a substantive part of foreign direct investment, but we want to focus on the greenfield aspect of it. So as you can see, a lot of this is kind of what you would expect. Japan is a very heavy player in all of these, but there's also some ones that I think we weren't expecting, say for instance, France. So this helps us get an idea of where we need to put our resources and what we need to do in order to try and build investment opportunities here in the state. And as a result of some of this information that we came up with, we have relocated some of our resources, and specifically in order to focus on Germany, because we realized that that was a place where we thought we could see that there was a lot of opportunity. And then we've also been trying to do more stuff with the UK and France based on this feedback. So just to give you kind of a highlight of one of those areas, ag tech, I've highlighted some companies and organizations here in the bottom. I specifically tried to avoid companies that everyone knows. I mean, I think Nebraska is best known for our center pivot irrigation companies, whether that's Valmont or Lindsay or Rinke or T&L, but then also grain bin systems with Chief and Balin, all those that everyone knows, or local champions like Orthman, for instance. But I wanted to say, kind of give you an idea that there's a lot of other stuff that's also going on that I think we can tap into. So, Claas has been a great addition to the state's industrial base. We think that they have a lot of opportunity to grow. Where they are currently, they primarily assemble combines, but as you can see, they have a full line of equipment, and so there's a lot of opportunity there. And we're always talking to them about any opportunity we can see to get them to grow. But outside of that, one thing that people don't realize sometimes is that CNH Industrial is a foreign-owned company now. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the state that is not necessarily tied to domestic ag manufacturers. And then outside of manufacturers, we want to focus on ag tech because there is a lot of activity there, and we think that we can pick up some small companies or startups that have a lot of opportunity to grow and can bring kind of that organic growth to the state. So a couple of those examples would be like Realm 5 or Quantified Ag. And as part of that effort, we're working with Invest Nebraska to host the On-Ramp Agricultural Conference that was held for the first time here online last year. And then we will have the second one next year, hopefully, or this year, hopefully in person. Outside of ag tech, as another example, is bioscience, or what I call industrial biotech. I use this term in order to make a differentiation between this and say med tech or medical sciences. This is, what these companies are doing is essentially industrial scale production of very high-end products, but using a lot of the same process that's used in, say, the ethanol industry. And so part of the reason we really want to focus on this is we think there's opportunity for collaboration and co-location with international companies and our ethanol producers. All three of these companies here are co-located with in a wet mill facility in Nebraska. A lot of the co-locations has been happening around wet mills, but we think that there is a good opportunity with dry mills as well. And so we want to try and make use of those dry mills that are spread out across the state in order to build up our industrial base, and especially in rural areas. So, final stages, how exactly do we go about this? As I mentioned, besides outbound efforts that we have as staff, where we're going out and meeting with companies, either or going to trade shows with companies that are exporting. We are also, higher profile visits by elected officials like the governor help us to get access to companies and help us to get access to local governments that can help us to move things forward. So Governor Ricketts has been very active on the international front. He's been very supportive of the efforts of the Department of Economic Development and Department of Agriculture. And we've collaborated on a lot of things. And just recently, here are a few examples of our trade missions. As you can see, they're kind of what you would expect: some old markets, some new, but focusing on places where either we have a lot of export potential or current customers to thank our customers and to find new ones, and then also places where we think we can identify and attract investment into the state. Besides those outbound efforts, then we also have two specific locations where we have permanent offices. That is because we believe that these markets are most important or have the most potential for growing the state and helping us to identify companies or identify opportunities for Nebraska companies. The office in Japan and Tokyo has been open since 2006, so we have a long history there. And then as I mentioned before, the office in Germany is more recent, but we have a tremendous opportunity there. The a person who is leading that and represents the state of Nebraska, Tio Frya, is the former CEO for Kloss Global. So his network is extremely deep, and we feel like we can use that in order to get in touch with companies that would be interested in the state. So I will leave that there. If there are any questions, I can answer them at the end. My contact information is just my name, cobus.block@nebraska.gov. Feel free to reach out at any time. And I am going to go ahead and stop sharing this and hand it over to Susan Rouch, or I guess Megan. I don't know if whoever I'm supposed to hand it over to.
Yep, go ahead, Susan. I'll let you get your screen pulled up here. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Susan. There we
Okay,
go.
is that better?
Yep.
Let's see if I can share the screen here. I'm having the same problem I had earlier. Okay. So are you able to see my screen?
We are. Yep.
You are. Okay, good.
You just want to do the presentation view and it'll be bigger here for everyone.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again, as Cobus did, for giving us the opportunity to meet with some of our NEDA partners across the state. I'm the Export Development Manager and STEP Grant Administrator for the Department of Economic Development. I have over 35 years experience working with Nebraska businesses to export their products abroad. It was not something I intended to do. I actually majored in accounting and I was going to become a CPA. That didn't happen, and I'm certainly glad it didn't. I was actually hired by Governor Bob Kerrey in 1983 as DED's first full-time international staff person devoted to promoting Nebraska abroad. And back in 1983, there weren't very many companies who were really doing very much on an international basis. I organized and led a delegation of Nebraska companies to the first state-sponsored or state-supported international trade show, which was held in China in 1985. And then in 1981, I organized and managed Nebraska's first governor-led trade mission, traveling to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan. So those early years were really establishing a base for us to continue the expansion of Nebraska's international business community here, as well as our contacts abroad. I continued to promote Nebraska worldwide, traveling to countries throughout the world, which has been quite a career, like I said, considering I was going to become a CPA and majored in accounting. But I've been a member and past president of the Nebraska District Export Council. I've served as a member and president of the board of directors for the Midwest International Trade Association, and currently serve on the NEDA Advisory Council for that group. My primary responsibility now is the administration of the State Trade Expansion Program, which is also known as the STEP Grant Program, and it's working with qualified small businesses to export abroad. So we are always looking for new to export companies, or those small businesses who are interested in establishing international exports, as well as the market expansion companies who are interested in expanding their own current exports. The STEP program is a federal grant through the U.S. Small Business Administration with the purpose of doing two things: increasing the number of small businesses who are exporting outside the state of Nebraska, and also to increase the value of exports for those small businesses that are currently exporting. The STEP grants are operated on a reimbursement basis for the qualified small businesses. And in Nebraska, the program is designed to help defray the costs incurred by small businesses to market their products abroad and to assist them in identifying potential international buyers. So with that, we have to take a look at the process itself for making use of the STEP program. The program is available to what they call eligible small business concerns. So the first thing the company needs to do is to fill out an application online to identify themselves as a small business based on SBA standards. After we qualify them as a small business, they're eligible then to submit an itemized budget request or an IBR for each activity for which they're requesting funding to support those activities going into international markets. The IBR, or the itemized budget request, has to be approved before they incur their costs. I know the screen says any costs, but there is some give and take in there related to the project in order to be eligible for reimbursement. When the activity is completed and the STEP client has covered all of their expenses, they then submit a request. I don't know why this keeps going back. They then go ahead and submit a request to DED for reimbursement for eligible expenses. And that takes less time now than it used to, but it's certainly been a great opportunity to get some money back into the hands of our small businesses. There's a 25% company match of the maximum reimbursement allowed for these activities. SBA wants to know that each company that we work with has some skin in the game. We always say it's free money, but they do want to know that each company has a purpose and design to making use of the funds. Funds are awarded on a first come, first served basis as long as we have funding left. And the maximum reimbursement per company over the life of the grant is just under $25,000. And we limit that to $24,999 because once we hit the $25,000 mark, SBA adds additional reporting and documentation that we just don't think is necessary for that additional $1. When we look at the company eligibility requirements, I said that they have to meet the SBA standards. They have to be in business at least 1 year, US owned and operated in the United States. They have to produce an exportable product that contains at least 51% US content. And they have to qualify as a small business entity according to the North American Industry Classification System, the NAICS system. So the eligibility there is based on the SBA size standards, and these are based on either the average number of employees or the average annual receipts for the previous 12 months for the company. So when we look up on the NAICS system, the company can identify which number or which code most accurately describes what they do. So for instance, a manufacturer of conveyors or conveying equipment would fall under the average number of employees, which for that industry would be less than 500 employees. So if they have more than 500 employees, they would not be qualified to make use of the STEP grant program. But a company that might do architectural services would fall under the average annual receipts, and that maximum would be $8 million per year. And if they made more than $8 million, then they would not qualify. So it all depends on what that NAICS number is, you know, how they are judged in terms of annual employees or annual receipts. They have to submit a self-representation form, which is provided by the Small Business Administration to us. And they're basically saying, yes, we qualify based on those above eligibility requirements. They also have to submit a debarment certification form, And it's basically something that tells us you're not on any of our bad boy lists. So each of the companies must be eligible to do business in the US and abroad, and is not on what is called the US excluded parties list. So making sure that they are eligible is certainly our first step. What most companies want to know is, what can we do with the money that we get from you? So Nebraska has designed a program to help defray the cost of some of their export marketing expenses. We start with our domestic and international trade shows. A domestic trade show in most cases does have an international component to it. It has international buyers that come, as well as some international exhibitors. We can reimburse up to $2,000 per activity to cover some of the eligible expenses that are incurred for companies to attend those shows. If it happens to be in a trade show that occurs outside the United States, then we are able to increase that reimbursement to $5,000 per activity. Included in that then is the international sales trips. So if a company needs to go overseas to see their international buyers, they may make a trip over and visit several different locations within Europe or within a particular country. We can reimburse up to $5,000 again of those eligible expenses. And when I'm talking about eligible expenses, we're talking about their travel expenses, transportation expenses, on the ground, hotel, exhibition-related expenses. If they're going to a trade show, they might have registration fees or booth registration fees. They may have to ship some of their samples over to be on display. We will cover the majority of those up to the maximum guidelines allowed. We do not reimburse for food or beverages. So I always tell our companies, we will get you over there and back, but we're not going to let you have any fun. So we did take that a little step further, and they may use the per diems established by the U.S. Department of State as part of the company match that is required. So we may not reimburse for food or beverages, but it's still an advantage to the program. U.S. Department of Commerce has some match marketing programs. We'll reimburse up to 75% of the program application fee and up to 2 activities per company per grant period. Marketing media design and translation services. Sometimes it's just an advantage for the companies to have their product literature or company literature or their website translated into the language of the country in which they're focusing. So we help to assist in the establishment of a good translation project for them. And, they may need to develop some marketing videos. So the marketing media design comes into play, and we can reimburse up to $6,000 per company per grant period for some of those related expenses as well. We talk about website development and optimization. When companies start going overseas, they really need to take a look at their website to see, are there portions of that need to be translated? Is there something more that they can do to make it more user-friendly for international buyers? And we can reimburse up to $6,000 per year per company per grant period to assist in the cost of those activities as well. And then there's always an option or sometimes a requirement for companies to have their products tested and certified within the country that they're going to be selling in, to make sure that they meet the standard qualifications within that country. So they're required to do some third-party product compliance testing. That can be very expensive. I had one company call me up and they said, the testing for just one of our products is going to be $35,000. I had another company say to get it tested and certified is going to be $75,000. Well, we can't reimburse up to those qualifications, we are able to reimburse up to $6,000 again for the company for the current STEP grant period. And then we've added training and educational activities this year. We'll reimburse up to $75 of the registration fee for training activities and up to 3 activities per company per grant. So that, I think, is a fairly wide array of activities that they can use their products or their funding for. And if they have other ideas that they'd like to use money for, I always like to hear that as well, because we can always go back to the Small Business Administration and request consideration. So while this is our typical list of activities, it's certainly not all-inclusive, perhaps. The grant extended or started on September 30th of 2020. It was supposed to end September 29th of 2021. However, because of COVID, that deadline has been extended to September 29th of 2022. So the Nebraska funds currently are about $263,000. We requested less this year because COVID has required so many events to be canceled and so many companies have not been able to do their international traveling that we didn't feel that we were going to be able to make use of as much of the funding as we've had the last 2 years, which was $500,000 in federal funding. The applications and IBRs can be submitted anytime. There's no application deadline. However, all of the activities and expenses need to be completed before September 29th of 2022 in order to qualify for reimbursement. We do request a 30-day advance notice of the activity so that we can process the IBR in time for the activity to be completed. And like I said, they can apply anytime during the grant period and get that set up so that the money is held for them in terms of making sure that the money is available when the activity does occur. A good contact is Meredith Bond with our director of our Omaha U.S. Commercial Service or U.S. Department of Commerce. She helps with some of those match marketing programs that I mentioned earlier. There's a Gold Key Service, International Partner Search, and other activities that fall under business facilitation activities. And she has been extremely helpful in working with our small businesses to determine whether or not they are going back to something that's going to be feasible for them to complete within that particular country. So with that, Cobus had mentioned, most of the programs that are available through DED, as well as, some of the resources that we have available to assist in export expansion. And if they have any questions, if you find any companies who are remotely interested in international, I encourage them to contact me or Lori Shaw, which many of you I'm sure know. Lori is also our business relations grant coordinator, and she not only works with me on the STEP grant program, but she works on a number of other federal grants that are administered through the Department of Economic Development. So we want to make sure that the companies know that there is someone available in DED who can work with them to try to expand their international activities. And I'm going to now return it, I guess, back to Megan for a question answer period.
Perfect. Go ahead and have you unshare. There we go. Okay, we do have a couple questions in here. The first one comes from Trevor Lee. When trade missions resume, what is the best way for our organizations to participate when the mission is in a country/region of interest to our local companies?
So when we have those trade missions planned, if it's a governor-led trade mission, most of the time there are occasional times where it's a smaller group and we do not extend an invite generally to the public. But most of the time we make that plan known through, we put out a public statement. The governor usually announces it, and we ask people to contact us if they're interested. We do ask people to kind of fill out an application for us to help determine whether or not they have a reason to go along. And it is, of course, the cost is sizable when you consider both the cost of the events and then also the cost of planes, hotels, etc. So, but they are open to the public, generally speaking. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out, I guess, for NDED press releases. If we are going to do something that's open to Nebraska companies or economic development organizations, the invite will go out that way, and you'll be able to see it there. And then we'll have an application page where you can make an application.
Okay, great. And then I had this question come in for Susan. Does Susan have a marketing email that explains the program that we as economic developers can share with our companies? Is the fund oversubscribed or does it typically have available funds?
There is a link on the DED webpage. If you go to the site for international activities, there's one specifically for the STEP program. It has an overview of the program as far as the activities and the eligibility requirements and the reimbursement process that they can take a look at, and they can apply from that site as well. And typically we do have funds available throughout the year or throughout the grant period. Like I said, now is a little bit different because COVID has certainly affected many of the activities that our companies had normally attended, and certainly curtailed the international travel for the last 12 months. But typically there is enough funding left to meet all of the needs of the company, and we rarely, if ever, have had to turn anyone down because of lack of funding. But the earlier they get that application in, the better, because like I said, we earmark that that funding for their specific activities, and they have to submit an itemized budget request for each activity. They can't just do one for the entire year. So once we get that fund earmarked for them, they could apply now for something that's going on in January of 2022, and we would earmark those funds for them to be able to use. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
This is Lance from South Sioux. That one of the questions is select USA of any value. I see they're doing lots of programs where like tie ag businesses in Montana with a certain country. Is that something we should be looking at as a state to do a statewide USA like they do with other locations?
Yeah, we work with them on a pretty regular basis, and we've done a number of events with them in the past. So last year we did an event with them in Brazil, focused on ag tech. And so it's definitely something that we're doing and we've made use of. We will have a presence at the Select USA virtual conference this year. It's usually in person, so we usually have a team go down and have a booth there. This year it's virtual, but I think if anyone's interested in that, we can get more information to you as well.
Just seems to me that's something NEDA might want to look at to see what country and what activities we want to focus on.
Sure. So a lot of that information should be available on that international page on our calendar that I mentioned earlier. And like I said, we've done a number of events with them in the past. We actually we're planning 3 different events this last year, one in Germany, one in Canada, and one in Korea. And those were, of course, postponed because of COVID. But yes.
I'd also ask, are foreign trade zones any importance to us?
Yeah, they are. They're very helpful. It depends. So there's 2 foreign trade zones in Nebraska, and there's one, it's a bonded warehouse in Omaha, and then the other is based out of Lincoln, but has I don't know what the exact terminology is, remote campuses or remote locations across the state. And for companies, especially companies that are bringing in a product are bringing in a number of products from overseas and then potentially either assembling them and exporting them overseas again, they can be very useful.
The foreign trade zones can be used especially for companies that have components that they're importing. If they bring it into a foreign trade zone, initially they don't have to pay the import duties on them, and if they substantially change the product from the piece that is imported to the piece that leaves the foreign trade zone, it may also change the amount of the fees that are required. So they can do some of the work within the trade zone to change those product codes as well that may help their cash flow in terms of entering the United States and exiting. They don't have to just re-export the product. It can be then transported to any market within the United States. So it can be very helpful for companies.
And that seemed to be a really common topic across the news media about onshoring opportunities. And I'm wondering, as a community, is there something, do you have any recommendation for our communities across the state on how do we seek out those opportunities? Is there not a way to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this, I would say in some ways, a lot of it's going to be the same as what we would recommend for on the business recruitment side, generally speaking. So having locations up on LOIS so that we know what's available and any of the best practices that you would normally see for business recruitment. Outside of that, if your communities better than we do, and so if there are specific industries where you guys are focused in, and you'd like feedback from us on what we think would be the best opportunities, we can certainly give you some ideas, and we're certainly willing to work with you on as Lance said, if you want to, for instance, if you would like to work with Select USA, they can do events for economic development authorities. It's at cost, so it'll cost you some money. But in the past, most of the time that's been in person. This year has kind of changed a lot of that. So they're a lot more willing to do things virtually now, which makes it a little bit more accessible for people if you don't have the time or schedule to travel overseas. Alternatively, if you're interested in coming, with us on some of our trips, or if you want to be involved, we're always happy to have local representatives. It's a lot of the times I think the problem the communities have is there is a bit of a cost to it. But if you're interested in joining, whether it's a trade mission or just a recruitment trip with us, we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions today?
Megan, I'd like to mention too that, although COVID and the coronavirus has certainly changed how we do business, it's also been somewhat to our advantage as well, because I think sometimes now we're able to reach more companies one-on-one through our WebEx and Zoom meetings. So if you do have any companies, in your area who might have some questions, we can do a one-on-one Zoom meeting with them. And both our staff, and we can include others like Meredith Bond, who would be able to provide information to them as well. So we're not on the road as much, which I like and yet I dislike, because I've always really enjoyed getting out and actually seeing the company and what they're, what they're manufacturing and how they're doing business, and helping to evaluate, what other DED programs might benefit them. So think about that next time you visit with some of your small businesses, and we'd be happy to set up a Zoom meeting with them one-on-one anytime.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I just want to thank Cobus and Susan again for joining us this morning. And thanks everyone for joining us. With that, we'll go ahead and close out. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you.